that we are being recorded now. Just a reminder, if you're not speaking, please keep your mic and video turned off. But if you do have a question, please feel free to put your question in the chat. I'm going to keep track of those questions, and I will read those out to Natalia at the end when we do a question and answer period. And I guess that's all I need to say. So I'm going to hand it over to Natalia to begin.
Thank you, Derek. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalia. So I am a professor of mathematics and statistics at Sheridan College since 2011. And before that, I worked at Brock University. So I taught a lot of mathematics and statistics courses. I love to incorporate technology in all my courses, some software, simulations, demonstrations, and of course, algorithmic questions. Okay, let me expand my presentation. All right, so randomizing assessments, I'll start with a couple of definitions from online dictionaries. So to randomize means to make something unpredictable or random in order of arrangement. It also says unsystematic, but that's not what we want when we try to assess students. So I would say unpredictable, but with a strict system, a special system. I'll talk about it later. But it could also mean like different order, different arrangement. And another definition is to make something random so that it happens or is chosen by chance, especially as a way of making a test fairer or more accurate. I think by the test, they mean hypothesis tests like statistical tests for when you select samples or do research or studies, but it kind of works for assessment purposes as well. We want to make our assessments fair and accurate for everyone. Some reasons to randomize assessments are that it allows more practice for students, because if, for example, it's an ungraded assessment, like a self-assessment, it could be a pre-work, a homework, a review. You can do multiple attempts with different questions. If they are randomized, students can explore more different types of questions. The second reason, it makes some assessments more interesting, because if you say have a project for your students and it's exactly the same project or the same task for everyone, you will have many identical submissions, and it's not interesting. But if you variegate the project or the task or group work by their group numbers, or make them different, or make them in different contexts, first of all, it's more interesting for yourself, but also if they have peer review or presentations, they don't have to listen to exactly the same thing over and over. Another good reason to randomize is less cheating. I talked about it in the February OCMA event, how to prevent cheating and how to deal with it. So if students know that questions are randomized and everyone gets a different version, they might be less inclined to ask around and to seek for help. If it still happens, it is easier to catch if students have different versions or different questions or different variables. It is sometimes even possible to pinpoint from whom exactly they were cheating of, just because everyone has different numbers, for example. And another reason would be that it is easier to edit your assessment, assignments, tests, quizzes. You can create multiple versions easily. You can create a makeup if needed. You can do corrections. For example, if you use many questions in the system or on paper, and you have to correct, let's say in all questions you accidentally said use one variable, so you use one decimal, and then you decided to use 2 decimals. If it's just a set of questions, you'll have to correct each one. If it's an algorithmic question, you only have to correct it once, and it's faster. Some considerations for randomizing are, of course, fairness and consistency. So despite students having different questions, we need to make sure it's still on the same level of difficulty and skills. An example could be you give a quadratic equation with coefficients A, B, C, which are different for different students. And if those coefficients A, B, C in the quadratic equation depend on a student number, so for example, you ask them to use their last 3 digits of their student number, but what if there are zeros in their student number? It means some students will have a fair quadratic equation with A, B, C non-zero, but someone might have a linear equation if A is 0, or quadratic equation but where B or C is 0, which is easier to solve. So you need to think about things like that to make sure that it's still on the same level. Transparency, I always tell students there will be versions, it will be randomized, you will not have a friend with the same answers. Don't worry about it, just do your work and it will be fine. And we can adjust it depending on the assessment time, purpose, difficulty, type of assessment, how much time you have to prepare it, to grade it, and so on. Some downsides of randomizing is that it's not always possible, or some limitations depending on the system we use. There are some limitations for paper tests, or do we have our learning system available for all students, or do they not have access to like computer or something. Preparation and testing takes a lot of time. So if you only create 4 static versions for your exam, it's pretty much, you just proofread them, you're done. But if you're creating an algorithmic question, you kind of have to consider all possible values of those variables and all possible cases. And does it work well? Does it give you a feasible solution? Does it give you some errors sometimes? And finally, grading and feedback. So it is sometimes possible to use automatic grading, but if not, of course, randomized questions will take more time because they are sorted in different order, like different students have different numbers. You need like some master template for solutions. So it might take extra time as well. Let's talk about which types of assessment could use randomizing and which type don't have to. So first of all, we have some very basic one like pre-work, practice, reviews. They're usually not graded, or they have a very low weight assigned to them. And the idea is that students should be able to do them on their own without necessarily communicating with the professor a lot, which means it's either short questions, or if it's a long question, it should be split step by step so they know what to do. Ideally auto-graded so they can get immediate feedback, and detailed solutions provided ideally also right away, and maybe multiple attempts so they can try again, and so on. So for this part, is it worth to make it randomized? So sometimes in some of our courses, we just give a file, like a document with all the questions, and it's just one document. So we don't randomize it at all. It's the same order for everyone, it's the same numbers, because the idea is that they practice, not actually get assessed on it. Then there go small assignments, small quizzes that are not worth a lot of marks, like short and long questions. They could be also partially auto-graded. And if it's a weekly assignment or a weekly quiz, we would like to get results like quickly, right? Like if not immediately, but at least not all manual grading, which takes days. And then major tests, exams, major assignments, projects, case studies, presentations, those would be like short and long questions, probably manually graded, and feedback is provided after some period of time. So there is time to actually review and grade like all those different versions. Then again, so like the further we go, like the more important I guess it's to randomize. But then again, for small quizzes, I sometimes do use a lot of randomization. So now in one of our courses, there is quiz 1, which is worth just 5%. So it's like in this on this side, but I like to give individual version to everyone. So like before the lockdowns, we had, for example, 45 students in class, and I told them we will have 45 versions of this quiz. You don't have to look around. There is no way, just do your version and so on. So everyone had different answers. They either believe me or they don't, but after they realize, yeah, this happens, and some get reported because I know exactly from whom they were exchanging answers. And then later in the semester, it gets more relaxed because they know the drill, and I don't have to use 45 versions again. I just keep telling them we will have versions, do not look around. And when we used to have invigilators, they were always surprised, like, your classes are so quiet, like they don't look around. It's kind of relaxing for students, like you do your work, there's no way you can get help, just concentrate. And so sometimes it's worth to like start with very randomized assessments to like set up their expectations. Paper versus computer assignments. So technically in both it is possible to use some sort of randomization. So for paper, the easiest way is to use like student number, their initials, month of birth, day of the week, group number to assign different tasks, for example. You can randomize within class, between classes, and you can use computer applications to generate questions and answers, right? So for paper assessments, you can still do it on a computer first and then print it out like in different versions. For computer assessments, of course, there are more options. So there are question pools, shuffling, algorithmic questions, multiple attempts, and each attempt can have different questions. Adjust feedback view, so you don't have to show all questions, or you can only show incorrect, for example, or you can only show them for a short period of time and close it afterwards. And various types of questions are applicable to both paper and computerized. You can even combine those. So for example, students first go to your learning management system and pick up their task depending on their student number, group number, and then they complete it on paper. For example, they sketch curves or do graphs or do some sort of analysis or solve some questions. Or the other way around, they can attach their papers to a computer assessment, or both. They first pick up a task, then they do it manually, and then they upload it. Or one part could be done online. So we do this in our statistics course. All the calculations, graphing, all the hard work with big data sets, they do it on their computer. So they use like special software to do it. And it's heavily randomized, of course. You can give them different data sets and different questions. And then part 2, they do on paper. So they close their computer. They cannot communicate as much. Well, this is like outside of lockdown, of course. This is in class, like on paper, when things get back to normal and before they were normal. And on paper, you don't have to have that many versions. So you basically would give them an output printed out, and they just explain stuff. So they don't need to actually like calculate things, just explain. Okay. All right, so I'll start with the easiest one, with the most straightforward. Just assign different versions depending on their student number, initial, and so on. Basically, you just print out or post one document, so you don't have to create multiple versions yourself. And then the student has to select a proper version, or fill in proper numbers, or pick up the proper data set, and so on. So it is easy to set up. It could be used for paper and online. It is efficient for large classes because you don't have to create like 500 versions. The downsides are it does require some planning time, of course, and control. Did they use did they use their student number, or did they use their friend's student number for that accidentally? And then it requires longer grading because you need to split them by groups and work within each particular set. So I'll give you an example we used at the university. So at the beginning of the homework assignment, students need to fill in the last 4 digits of their student number, A, B, C, D. And then I only had to print one paper, one version for everyone, but they have to fill in like the digits for each number in their question. And then they solve that question with their specific numbers. Some accidents happen. So some students confused all 4 digits of their student number, which accidentally coincided with another student they were friends with, but it's very easy to catch and report, right? Also, we need to be careful. I have a leading 1 almost everywhere here because the very first time I forgot, and there was a student with lots of zeros. They got a very easy question here. They got like a linear function or something. So you need to make sure that it works for different digits, right? Like, so it doesn't create so when you differentiate this function, it's like that quadratic equation that we talked about. Yeah, so very easy to create, more difficult on the other side when you have to actually check it and grade it. Another example we used at the university, this is for a statistics course where we had 500 students in a classroom, and they all did a mini project. So they had to use last digit of their student number to first select a province or territory. And then within that region, they used their first letter of their name to select a city with the same letter, and use the data from the weather website to work with it, like analyze it statistically, do graphs, calculations, and whatnot. There were some problems here, like someone got like Northwest Territories. There were very few cities there, and people complained like there is no city with my letter in it. Some students said like, is it my first name or my last name? Which one? Like, it needs to be very detailed. The instructions need to be very detailed. And then you kind of have to check, did they use the right province? Did they use the right like city and so on? But at least we didn't have 500 identical statistical projects, so that was good. And another example, this is done through the learning management system. So similar idea, but like more automated application. So you basically split your students in groups within your learning management system, and then you release condition. They can only see whichever version of the task or of the question, in this case, or data set. They can only download their own file. A little problem is they only see one file. So they open this folder and they only see one file, and they think, oh, all right, so we have the same file, everyone, nice. So I always highlight, no, you only see your file. There are many more. Do not share it with anyone. Like they will be different. So they don't know who are with the same group that they are, right? Like which version they see. So they are not that inclined to share. So this is like the very basic level, right? The next level would be to actually use some software to generate random questions, for example, Excel. So it could be used for paper and online. You could generate your answers at the same time. Excel is a pretty common technology that everyone has, so it doesn't require any special like publisher system that you have to purchase. The downside is you still need to prepare it, care for formatting. Grading, I put a question mark because it could be automated. So when you create your questions in Excel, you can just copy and paste them into your learning system and paste the answers, so it gets auto-graded for short questions. However, if you use it on paper, or if you use it for open-ended questions, again, like everyone will have slightly different numbers, so you will have to manually grade, and it might take some time. So it depends on the type of the question. I'll give an example. So, for example, a blazer is sold and it is listed at a specific price, and then it's discounted by one discount rate, and then it's discounted again by another discount rate. And students need to find the first amount of discount, the second amount of discount, and the final price. So everything in this question is randomized, including the type of the item. So there is a function in Excel that allows to select from a list of words. So it's called choose. And then I have like a blazer, a jacket, a parka, a computer desk, a chair, an armchair, and so on. And then it gets randomly inserted into the question. And then when I copy those questions into our test, I can easily create multiple versions. And then the student cannot like ask their friend, oh, do you have the Blazor question? Let's compare, right? Because it will be different. And numbers are randomized, of course. So there is the rand between function for whole numbers in Excel, and there is the rand function for decimal numbers. You can play with it. So for example, I wanted my list price to end by 9, like 119, 129, 139. I wanted my discounts to have 2 decimals, like 0.29, 0.07. And then I generate answers at the same time. So those are formulas depending on the given numbers. And that's it. Like every time I refresh my Excel file, I can copy a new question into my paper test or into my learning system, and copy my feedback again into a separate file or into the learning system. I will share this Excel file. There are 2 questions in this file. Just if anyone is interested how it works, so I'll share a link at the end so you can download and play with it. It doesn't have to be like business problem. You can change it to like science, engineering, whatever. You can use more variables, right? I only have like 3 here. You can use more. All right. So, but this is just Excel only. This is like, again, the most basic version. However, Excel can be used together with Word document to fix formatting and so on. So basically, because I have a formula here, this is like a concatenation of different words and numbers and so on. I cannot use formatting, so I cannot bold, do bold text or italic or like subscripts or superscripts, unfortunately. So see, I use like underscores here to emphasize the word additional, because inside the formula, I cannot make it bold, but I wanted students to understand that in the second part, I'm asking about the second discount, not the total discount. But however, we could combine Word and Excel together, and then all the formatting is possible, but it's slightly more advanced. So it's called mailings in Word. It's called mailings because it used to be a function, well, it still is, to print out envelopes to send to people, right? Like, so you have a list of people names, addresses, and so on, and then you can automatically print the same letter with different names and with different addresses. This is why the Excel file that is linked is called recipient list. Okay, let me close the window because there is sound, sorry. Okay, so sorry. All right, so the Excel file is called recipient list because it's designed for like those people addresses, but we will use it for our assessments instead, right? So you create an Excel file with the corresponding variables. So for example, I want my selling price to be randomized, markup amount, the name of the store, and the name of the product. I created an Excel first, and then I create a Word document in which I include my Excel document in the recipient list and insert some variables from my Excel file, the titles for each column, and then it picks it up and create separate versions for me, which is nice because it's automated. So I only have one Word document, but then I click merge mail, and I can choose to create it as separate Word documents or as a PDF or as one big Word document with different pages and so on. And it automatically like different stores, different items, different prices, and so on. For this one, I even made it this way that numbers are calculated nicely for easier grading. So this is like the selling price, and this is the markup. If you subtract them, you get the cost. So the answer, and the students are asked to find the cost. So if you subtract the first one, it gets like $41.25. The second version, $42.25. The third version, $43.25. So if students don't know the pattern, they might not figure it out. But it is easier to mark because I can sort them by version number, and then I approximately know which digit they should get where. It doesn't have to be the same digit always, right? It could be the first or the third or the fourth digit. So it's hard to pick up on the student side, but it is easier for me to grade it. The percentage is also like, this is 31%, 32, 33.5, like, so you can kind of not just random numbers here, but you can put them some sort of formulas as well, so that answers follow a specific pattern which students don't know, but you know, so it's easier to grade afterwards. I will share those files as well if anyone wants to play with it, but it is tricky because when you download both the Word document and the Excel, you need to actually include your Excel into your Word. You need to click a recipient list and actually find it on your computer, find the Excel file, and then it starts working. All right, let's now talk about algorithmic questions. So those require like a special learning management system or a publisher system to actually work. So the previous ones, right, like assigning by student number using Excel, it's pretty much accessible for everyone. But those, it's only if your system allows it or your program uses a specific. So Brightspace, Desire to Learn, Blackboard, Moodle, Sakai, Canvas, and I'm sure there are many more. And publisher system, Pearson Lab, McGraw-Hill Connect, Lyrics, Wiley, Macmillan, and many more. They all have some sort of algorithmic questions. They're called differently. So I'll talk about the common ones. I'll show some examples. And I'll talk about Pearson Lab because it allows you to edit existing questions, which I just love. All right, so let's start with Brightspace, which is like Desire to Learn. It's called Arithmetic Questions. It does allow answer and units, some tolerance. Auto-graded, I put a question mark because it does grade the final answer. So it only allows one answer per question. Unfortunately, they didn't do like multi-answer questions yet. People are requesting since like years, but yeah. Limited functions. So for example, they don't have the maximum or the minimum function. So I had to be creative. Like there was a question where I had to use like the maximum of two numbers. And did you know that you can compute maximum and minimum using just the absolute function and the arithmetic operations, right? So if you have two numbers, A and B, you can find the midpoint, A plus B over 2. And if you add the absolute value of half the distance, you get the maximum. And if you subtract the absolute value of half a distance, you get the minimum. So you have to be creative because not all functions exist. But yeah, we are mathematicians, so we like the challenge. Basically, you insert your variables in curly brackets, and then you fill in like the minimum, the maximum, and the step for each variable. So for example, the quantity of calculators would be a whole number and goes by 10. The list price of the calculator is in dollars, and it can have 2 decimals for cents. And the date for May, so the date of the purchase, I used from 12 to 29 because this way the answer will have like, will be in July and not June and not August. So I am using 2 answers here. I just told you like there is only one answer, but I'm using the units box for my second answer. So like unconventional use for the second box. So the first box, they have to calculate the total price of all the calculators. And the second box, they have to calculate the date, which is like 50 days after whatever date they get. It's not ideal because it's not a single answer. Depending on which date they got in the question, they will input like July 1st, 4th, 7th, 10th. It goes by 3. So my reasoning is they may be wrong by 1 day or 2 days, but probably not by 3 days. So the system will pick it up. And of course, you can review it manually as well. So, all right. Another way to make those questions longer, right? Because if it only grades the final answer, what's the point? It's only like 1 mark, right? You could give open-ended questions. So the final answer will be graded. And then you can allow attachments so students can handwrite or type their solutions and attach them to their solution. And then you will know if their final answer is correct, this part will be auto-graded. And then you look at their solution to give them partial marks if needed. This is if you are not locking them in. If you are locking students in, this will not work, right? They cannot connect to an outside like email and download their file and something. So there is a workaround that I use. I create a separate written question following the algorithmic question in which they need to write the solution. So the algorithmic question is only worth 1 mark because it only shows their final answer. And then I say, show your step-by-step solution in the next question box. And that is worth more marks. They actually show their steps. So like a workaround for that. Another system is Moodle. It also has algorithmic question. What I like about it, you can link your variables through the entire quiz. So it also has like 1 answer per question, but you can do multiple questions with the same values of variables. So if in question 1, you give students X and Y, the dimensions of a rectangle, and ask them to calculate area. You can do in next question, question 2, and ask them to calculate perimeter. It keeps the same values if you want. So if you like synchronize your values, it can do that, which is nice. It can do multiple choice with algorithmic values or short answer with algorithmic values. So this is a pretty good one. Blackboard has algorithmic questions as well. Again, like not curly brackets, square brackets in Blackboard, and then you like define special intervals and can use it. And finally, let's talk about Pearson Lab, because many colleges do use it. So not only it has a huge database of algorithmic question, what I love the most that you can edit them. So you can edit existing questions. All the programming is done for you, right? Like the questions already exist, sometimes very complicated, sometimes with huge data sets or many variables and so on. And you can tweak them for your needs, but you can create new questions as well. You can use numeric and non-numeric variables. So you can randomize the context for the question, not only just the numbers, so to make them different. So instead of creating 10 different questions, for example, one student describes what profits are, another student the country budget, another student like their phone bill and whatnot, you can create just one question, which automatically changes the context of that question, and each student gets a different. So you only get to create one question, and then it automatically generates different contexts and different numbers. It also has linked variables and nested variables. So you can use a variable inside a variable. You can use a variable inside a variable sentence and so on, which is very nice. It can be multiple choice, short answer, multi-short answer, essay, auto-graded for the short kinds and multi-short kinds, or manually graded if you want like an open-ended question. Students can type formulas and formatting and attach images if you allow it. And for statistics courses, it already has data sets in some questions, and they're also random. They're also like regenerated actual Excel files that students get. The downsides are it is paid and it's not used in every course. So we use it in some of our courses, and I like it so much because I can tweak and play with it and so on. So I'll show a couple of examples. All right, so first, a question that I created in my lab from scratch. So it doesn't require any special knowledge or programming skills. So for example, students are asked to explain the meaning of the slope and y-intercept of a linear equation. Meaning of the slope in this case, meaning of the y-intercept in this case. The beauty is I don't have to create 10 different questions. I create just one question, but inside this question, there is a variable sentence. Within each is the a specific linear equation. So for example, one student will explain if profits from selling X salads are described by this linear function, which one is the slope, which one is the intercept, what's the meaning. And another student, value of a computer, which changes over time. what's the meaning of the variable, of the slope, of the intercept. And another student will have a country budget, where X is a year, and then they have like a slope and intercept. I get some funny results from this one when students say that the country budget depends on the number of salads. So they only see their version, but when they ask their friend, oh, what's the coefficient? And the friend says, oh, that's the number of, that's the price per salad. And then they say that the country budget depends on the number of salads or something. So it's very easy to catch with whom they communicated during the quiz, and their answers do not make sense whatsoever because they don't realize that they get different contexts. So they only see their version, right? Like, for example, they only see like the profit and the equation or just the import fee. And then this one is open-ended because we included it in the graded quiz. But if I wanted to give this question in a review, for example, non-graded, I could change it to a multiple choice. It allows that as well and give them options. So, for example, like the slope is this, that, or that, right? Like the slope is the number of salads per dollar, the number of dollars per salad, the number of profit per, I don't know, day or something, right? Like some different versions, and they would just, it would be auto-graded then. So if it's short answer or multiple choice, it would be auto-graded. But this one is for the quiz, so we just grade it manually. Another example is this one. It's not mine, it's like their question from their textbook from Pearson. But I edited it to make it serve as our purpose. So it was a question about an auto mechanic who does replaces shocks and brakes, like two variables, X and Y. And they have some restrictions for their work and limited time and special amounts that they get paid. And they, like the question was very short. Basically, the students had to find X and Y and the optimal income. So they had to solve a linear programming question, like optimize this auto mechanics income depending on how many hours or how many jobs they do, which is fine for like short quizzes. But if you want to include it in the review or in the major test and you want students to show the process, but you want it to be auto-graded at the same time, you can kind of detail the process, especially for review purposes, right? Like if it's not graded, but students can input their answers one by one and see which one went wrong. On the test, though, we can make it open-ended, right? Like just give them a box for the answer. But let's say this is for review purposes. So I included, will you minimize or maximize? Write down your function. Write down your constraints, left-hand sides and right-hand sides. The numbers are randomized, of course, so everyone will have different functions, different right-hand sides. A multiple choice on the restrictions on the variables. Do you want them non-negative or not? Do you want them integer or not? And then this one, X and Y, can be put as short answers, so without options. For example, for an exam, we would not give them options. They need to calculate and actually insert it. But for review purposes, you give them options. They can kind of even plug in, substitute all those options into the original question without even knowing how to solve this question yet. Let's say it's a pre-work, right, or a practice. They can actually check which answer works best, fits all the requirements, and gives the optimal income. And then they calculate the income. So again, like the whole job is done for me, right? The question existed with all the variables, all the calculations. I just included more steps to make it easier for students to use. All right, so the summary for all the ideas. So first of all, decide if it's good for that particular purpose, because it's not always optimal, right? Like, as I said, like reviews, sometimes you want them in a specific order. You want the questions to be fixed, to have specific answers the student can check. Learn, by that I mean learn about new technology, because I didn't know that in Desire to Learn you can do algorithmic questions. You can. I didn't know that in my lab you can edit questions. You can. So maybe there is something in your learning management system, or even for paper tests, there is some technique that you don't know about. You can just like search around and see what other people are doing. reiterate if needed. Like if something didn't work well, that's okay, right? Like we can improve later, and have fun, because this is kind of us professors being challenged on the mathematical level to program to like solve a higher level of parametric equations to make sure all those parameters work for those types of questions. I will include the link to my Google Drive with a couple of examples for using Excel, because I think like the Excel version is for everyone, even if you don't use special learning systems. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Natalia. There was not too many questions from the chat, but there was a comment. Norm shared that another good software for creating randomized test banks for many LMS systems is Respondus, and the link is here. So I'm just going to put that in the chat for everyone, in case anyone wants to check that out.
I think I've used Respondus as well. Yeah, it's a nice one if you have it, right? Like,
yeah, and I've created my own randomized questions as well, and it is great, especially for I find collaboration between students, right? So 4 different students have the same basic question with different numbers. They can all sit down and, pick one and try to figure out how to do that together. And then, that collaboration allows them to then go off and answer their own questions. And yeah, it's pretty fun to watch them work together and do that. Does anybody else have any other questions for Natalia? Oh, we have a question from Alan Warren. How long does it take to grade randomized assessments?
Forever. So, okay, there is an octagraded option, right? Like you can kind of like in Desire to Learn and so on, you can program it. If it's short questions, you would just insert questions and insert answers and it autogrades for you. If it's open-ended, yes, it takes forever. I would create an Excel file with all the answers. I would sort students' work by their like number or whatever and go. It does take a lot of time. But as I said, like you do it at the beginning of the semester once for the first quiz, you do like 45 versions, and then you can kind of reduce it. You can do like 4 or 5 versions from now on, but they don't look around anymore. So like 4 versions per class, it's even like the norm, right? Even without randomizing. So yeah.
Have you ever come across the situation where a student who had version A put down the answers from version B?
All the time. And I say like, it's so obvious. So imagine they had the same version and they did the same mistake. You never know. Did they rewrite from each other? Did they accidentally make the same mistake? They sometimes do. But imagine all their answers are just for different numbers. And when I meet with them, like for our reporting procedure, you have to meet with them, have a talk. And I ask them like, can you please show me how you got all those answers that are like exactly 1 or 2 units away from what you were supposed to have, right? Like it's very, and they say, oh man, but I didn't talk to anyone. You can watch the like video recording and whatever. Like I don't have to. There you go. There's your answers, right? Like there is just no way you accidentally put like 1 instead of 2 in every single question.
Yeah, that would have been a very interesting conversation to have had. I just got to scroll up. There was a comment from Maxim. I used Word plus Excel with mail merge. The inconvenience is that you have to keep the Excel file together with the Word file. What I found helpful is in Word filed system and using system time as a randomizer.
Oh, nice.
And even better is using LaTeX for such assessments.
I'm sorry, just I made a typo actually. Thank you for Natalia for interesting presentation, by the way. Yeah, it's a type of field system, not file. Like, you know, in the Word, there is.
Yeah. And you insert fields with the current like time or something.
Yeah, you can insert, like, it's pretty sophisticated. It takes a lot of time to kind of build that test, but when it works, it works. Unfortunately for Word, it doesn't have a random number generator. So, like, for example, when the file is open, that time can be triggered, like that particular second or millisecond, whatever, right? So that can be used as a randomizer. But even that I found also cumbersome. For the type of assessments, when you want to generate a document and give that those students that PDF, let's say, with your assessment, I found LaTeX is you know, the most powerful, like with using particular values. I actually had a talk on ACMA a couple of iterations before, maybe. I don't remember the year, but like that time I kind of also spoke about the ways to randomize Word and PDF assessments with LaTeX. Yeah, great talk. Especially, you know, what for me was the discoveries that you can yourself build questions in publisher platforms, which I've never done before. I kind of always used whatever they gave me. But so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll give you know, another second or two for anyone else to, you know, put something in the, put a question in the chat, or if you want to unmute your mic and ask a question. Otherwise, we can wrap this up and call it a day.
See, I was quick because at the end of the previous talk, Corey said like, you are all in your pajamas, and I'm like, yeah, am I like.
All right, well, thank you very much, Natalia. That was a great presentation, and yeah, hopefully we see everyone back for tomorrow's presentations. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.